around-the-clock harassment until you either end yourself or get the fuck out of our country. You're traitors, pigs! You are a fucking I'm coming after you guys.
I don't think we can wait until someone is injured or killed because of this kind of anger.
The threats are vile and often violent.
What concerns me is the growing extremism in the country.
Politicians are under increasing attack.
So this is where it happened?
Yeah, he walked right up and spit on me. I was concerned that he might have had a weapon.
This is absolutely unprecedented.
Where the rubber hits the road on this, our law enforcement needs to have more tools.
Defend our human rights.
What's behind the rising vitriol?
People are really stressed out and reaching their breaking point.
And what does it mean for all Canadians?
I think Canadians deserve to know what's going on.
There is a very concerted effort to try and erode our democracy.
These are scary times on Parliament Hill. Intimidation and threats of violence against the Prime Minister and politicians from all parties have become alarmingly routine. Harassment of members of Parliament is up nearly 800% in the last 5 years. It's happening here, at their constituency offices, even their homes. And with an election looming, tensions are rising.
Dearest Pam, I hope and pray to God that you will die a horrible, painful death, off with your head and hung from the gates. Burn in hell. C word.
That's hard to hear. I can't imagine what it's like for you.
I don't understand how people think it's okay to speak to people like that. I never, in my entire life, had anyone ever use that C word. And as a politician, in the last 4 years or so, it's used all the time. All the time.
And Pam Damoff says it's getting worse.
Now people are sending an email and adding their name and business name onto it. I think people are emboldened.
As a female politician, Damoff is among the most targeted. The Liberal MP has received hundreds of hateful calls, emails, and direct messages, some threatening her with rape, and she's had multiple death threats too. We reached out to some of the people behind them. They didn't want to talk to us about it.
People have said, you're a politician, you need thick skin, but not for that kind of stuff. And that's why when people approach you in public or on the street and start yelling, it's scary. You get your back up and wonder if someone has a knife or a gun.
It's why Damoff doesn't post her itinerary in advance or take walk-ins at her constituency office anymore.
How do you feel about the fact that you've had to kind of restrict access to you?
I mean, I don't think it's good for democracy. It's separating us from people. We just don't have those same kind of interactions anymore.
You're a fucking criminal!
For many, including the Prime Minister, the harassment has moved past messages to real life, like this incident where a man threw gravel at Trudeau.
Corrupted bastard.
Racialized politicians, including NDP leader Jagmeet Singh,
You're a coward, you're not going to say it to my face.
are often singled out, and requests for protection have soared.
We are absolutely looking at everything.
Michelle Paradis is the Assistant Commissioner in charge of the RCMP's protective policing.
We've seen a 93% increase in calls for service for the RCMP for protection.
Is that unprecedented?
This is absolutely unprecedented.
Unprecedented, but the sentiment behind the escalating abuse has been building for a while. Experts say it's tied to distrust for authority that exploded during the pandemic. It was on full display at the 2022 convoy protest, as well as at demonstrations against vaccine mandates and other public safety measures. The rhetoric was polarizing then, and Paradis says it's only become more extreme.
It is not necessarily reaching the threshold of criminality, but it reaches the threshold of awful but lawful.
Awful but lawful. What does that mean?
It's the difference between I hope you get hit by a bus versus I'm going to run you over with a bus. Run you over with a bus, criminality, there it is, a threat. But it's that other piece, which absolutely has an effect on somebody.
So when you're getting these calls for protection, not all are meeting the criminal threshold, but they certainly fall into the category of intimidation or threat or just feeling unsafe?
Very much so. And I can tell you, if it is a direct threat, it's action immediately.
The RCMP won't say how many direct threats it has responded to or how many it's tracking, but police at every level are on higher alert. Public access is now restricted when the House is sitting after protesters yelled obscenities and at least one shoved an MP this fall. Ottawa's police force has a new protective unit in the works, and behind the scenes, the RCMP is knocking on the doors of people who've made threats. Its behavioral experts are also watching for signs of escalation.
It sounds constant. You're constantly assessing an evolving threat.
Absolutely. And, you know, everybody will say to me, Michelle, what will help you sleep at night? And I don't think there's ever going to be a time where I'll be able to sleep at night. What we need is to be able to be constantly vigilant and constantly up to date.
There is a more combustible atmosphere.
Former Public Safety Minister Marco Mendocino says he's always looking over his shoulder, and he has good reason to.
How has it affected you directly? What kind of instances have you gone through?
Well, I've been exposed to political violence in a number of different forms. I've received death threats online. My family has been protested in our home. And last spring, I was spit on by a protester on Spark Street at the base of this building right here.
It must feel, to a certain extent, that you're under siege.
There's definitely...
Mendocino is calling for protective zones around politicians and harsher penalties for those who cross them, especially since a man spit on his face last June.
You got to have eyes in the back of your head now, for sure.
Parliamentary police officers were just behind those office doors.
All right, so here we are.
A stark reminder of how quickly an attack can happen and what's suddenly on the line.
So this is where it happened?
Yeah, I was standing right there. I was opening the door, and he walked right up and spit on me. I could see that he was coming up to me, and he was approaching at a fairly good clip, and I put my hand out.
Why did you shake his hand?
I was just trying to de-escalate the situation. I didn't want to exacerbate it, and I was concerned that he might have had a weapon or a gun. You know, in the moment, I think I was just trying to make sure I got home to see my wife and kids.
That video, including others of politicians being harassed, was posted on this YouTube channel. We reached out to the people behind this channel and to people who post similar content. They didn't respond to our emails. So we went back to Ottawa to hear from people who support those sites and to find out what they think about the harassment of politicians. Many here were at the convoy and still hold regular protests that they call freedom rallies.
My name is Brian Dirksen. I'm the trucker that never left.
A lot of harassment has been happening to politicians since the convoy, and I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
Well, a lot of it I don't like. I've been here for more than 1,000 days. I've been standing on these streets with a certain message, and I've had people yelling over my shoulders, and I'm like, God, please help me. You know, I mean, a lot of this nonsense, I don't like it, a lot of it. I'm against it.
Hi, how are you?
There's a range of people here with a range of grievances, from COVID vaccines to transgender care, immigration, and the economy. What they share is a deep distrust of government and mainstream media.
Y'all realize, you guys are going to prison, right? All CBC, CTV News will be held accountable for your corruption. Are you going to speak out? Are you going to tell the truth? Yes or no? That's all what I'm asking today.
What's the truth? What's the truth according to you?
Come on. I've had...
No one here says they've harassed politicians. Darlene Dornwood doesn't believe the abuse is even happening.
There's a lot of reports, death threats, rape threats against female politicians.
Is there? They're probably paying their own to do it to make us look bad, is what they do.
Do you think the threats are fake?
Well, I would believe some of them are.
So you think politicians are kind of orchestrating their own harassment?
Probably.
Howard Kwan says any harassment is justified.
I'll put it this way. Which came first? Angry Canadians or corrupt, incompetent, negligent politicians? People are getting really fed up. So it is righteous anger.
All of it is often around this kind of populist sentiment of, sinister elite, they're out to get us.
Amarnath Amarasingham is a researcher at Queen's University. He's been tracking a broader collapse of trust in authority and a rise in populist rhetoric. He says it's led to more extremist thinking.
This us versus them, elite versus the true people rhetoric that's also ramping up, which tends to be quite easily linked to conspiracy theories. If you believe that, we are the true representatives of Canada, or the true Canadians, or the true Americans, and everyone else is evil and elite, you have kind of, I would say, an inevitable rise in seeing politicians in particular as people who should not just be debated with, but attacked and threatened.
What you just said was all part of this crime against humanity.
Those voices, he said, may not always draw large crowds, but are increasingly normalized online and on alternative media sites catering to disaffected communities. The fear is that anger could intensify.
Where do you think it could go?
Part of the problem with the megaphone getting bigger and the audience getting bigger for some of these individuals is that if more people are listening to hate speech, anti-immigrant sentiment, anti-Canadian content, or anti-Trudeau content, the more likely it is that as that pool of people who are listening gets bigger, one of those people will actually act on it.
All of us expect to be safe in our homes, in our neighborhoods, and in our communities. We should be able to expect the same kind of safety in our online communities.
The urgency to contain rising radicalization is prompting politicians to legislate solutions. The Liberals introduced an online harms bill, and Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner introduced a private member's bill, informed by her own experience of being harassed.
How has your work changed because of the escalating abuse people like you are facing online and off?
This is tough for me. This is literally probably the, 100th interview I've done over the course of my career where I've been asked that question. So I choose not to answer it at this point, because for me it's more about what we're going to do about it.
Her frustration is clear because, she says, politicians aren't the only ones targeted.
What the bill does is it essentially creates what we're calling a digital restraining order. So that if somebody is experiencing online abuse, that they can, through law enforcement, request a judge to essentially issue a stop contact order.
And that would send a warning signal.
It's that people feel that they can act with impunity, and that's what we have to stop.
But it's not stopping. Police say the threat is ever present.
I always say if the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up, there's a reason for that.
And police are worried an election call could make it worse.
There's never been a time in our history that we've interacted with our national security on as regular a basis as we are right now.
The RCMP is adding officers to its protective unit while it recruits more. And for the first time, the Mounties will offer all party leaders the same level of protection afforded to the Prime Minister.
We've never been this far advanced in our planning as this election cycle. So if it happens tomorrow, if it happens next spring, if it happens next fall or summer, we'll be ready for it.
But this election is different, right? The threat level, or the temperature at least, is so high.
The temperature is higher than we've seen, but we are absolutely going to adjust to be able to meet that temperature.
I will never allow folks that are spewing extremism and hate weaken my resolve. In fact, it reminds me why I have to fight harder.
Leah Gazan says she's ready to run again, even if it means facing more abuse. As an Indigenous woman, the NDP MP says she's no stranger to harassment, but this is next level.
I've had threats of physical violence, emails threatening gun violence. I've had to have RCMP detail. And just by who I am, it makes me a natural target. Constant, like sometimes swearing, screaming, yelling.
Just as you're walking into the house?
Yeah, blow horns, all of that.
Gazan has also been stalked, bricks thrown through her constituency office windows. But she sees hope in the support people show her. And remarkably, she has empathy for those who keep going after her.
I think people feel really disenfranchised, particularly since the pandemic. People really are struggling. Mental health is not great. I think all levels of government have failed to provide proper mental health supports for people. As members of Parliament, we have to be extra cautious, extra mindful, that we use our positions in here to improve the material conditions for people, because when people are doing well, when you look after people, you build healthy communities.
That means seeing past the hate and still living with it. But Damoff is tired of being afraid. It's why, after nearly a decade in politics, she's not running again.
I love this job. I have been so blessed to do this job. I'm at peace with the decision I've made not to run again, and I know that it was the right decision for me. I mean, I could have just said I'm leaving politics for personal reasons to spend more time with my family. But I think Canadians deserve to know what's going on. And I think the vast, vast majority of Canadians don't support this at all.